All right. Okay. Hello there. This is Paul Glumaz speaking to you on the 25th of March, 2020. And this is being brought to you by General Welfare Presents. And we are going into this coronavirus situation deeper and deeper. And it's become apparent to some people that you need to have people working in order to keep the banking system going. It's not that the people that have been laid off by the coronavirus are all working, are all essential workers. They're not. They're primarily service workers. But if they're not going to restaurants, and they're not going to this and that, their income stream on which the financial system rests is being cut. And that income stream is necessary to sustain a pyramid of debt, which is being juggled in the quadrillions of range. And so the howling and screaming has begun to demand that Trump end the lockdown, to end the quarantine, and get people back to work. And so that pressure is massive. And you have to understand that that this situation has now become a situation where the general welfare of the population sits in one corner, and the demands of the financial system for its very existence sits in another corner. And the old metaphor that Lyndon LaRouche used for this was that the 100-pound tick on a 10-pound dog. Right now, you have a situation where the 10-pound dog cannot sustain the tick. And so what's going to happen? Is the tick going to get removed from the dog so the dog can survive, or is the dog going to die? And that's kind of the situation we're in right now with this economic situation. And so this is a profound awakening is now in the process of occurring to the American population, to the U.S. population. Because here we are, allegedly the most powerful country in the world, the most economically developed country in the world, the largest so-called GDP, gross domestic product, in the world. And there is a need to deal with this virus. China and South Korea are productive nations. They have a productive economy. So what they did is they mobilized their productive economy. They tested people. They quarantined those population, and they massively increased the hospitals for those who were seriously sick. And they carried it out in a very ruthless way. And when the U.S. and the European countries tried to do the same thing, they discovered they didn't have the supplies. They didn't have the ventilators. They didn't have anything. They didn't have the hospital facilities. They had none of that. And here we are, the most powerful country in the world, and we can't deal with a pandemic. We probably could have dealt with this pandemic better earlier, but China and South Korea dealt with this pandemic because they're not service-based economies. They're producer-based economies. We have become a service-based economies. Production, well, that's somebody else's job. We're here We're the entertainment capital of the world. We're the information capital of the world. We're the financial capital in New York, the second largest financial center in the world next to the city of London. And, you know, we have services. You know, we have all of the entertainment. We have the people that serve all of this, you know. And, you know, the flyover part of the country, you know, well, you know, that's the other part of the economy. It's not doing that well. And we can't deal with the coronavirus. And this is true for Europe. And it's definitely going to be true for the third world because they don't even have the infrastructure required to deal with the coronavirus. But it's not the coronavirus. There is a real virus, a much more serious virus, a much more deadly virus. And that virus has a word that I will mention now. It's called liberalism. Liberalism. Liberalism is a disease that we're dealing with. It's not COVID-19. It's liberalism. And why is that a disease? Because it's a mental disease. It's a philosophical disease. It's a political disease. And it takes many different forms. And most conservatives are liberal. They don't know it. That's the problem. And the essence of liberalism is that you don't have to deal with reality. Truth doesn't really exist. You can live in your own make-believe world. You can live in the make-believe world that the mass media creates for you. You can have that as your reality. You don't need to have, well, there is no, you know, it's whatever you want it to be. This whole infectiousness, this, there is no cognitive coherence between what you say and what you think, and what the consequences of what you say and what you think. And there's no sense of consequences. There's no sense of reality. Okay, very simple. As an example of what I'm talking about, food comes from the store. It comes from Amazon. You know, they might deliver the food. Comes from a supermarket, or other things come from other places. But where do those things come from? How do those things get created? How many people out there have any sense of that? They don't. Well, it sort of comes. It's like the stork, or Santa Claus, or, you know, the Easter Bunny or something like that. It's that kind of problem that you have. Okay, so we have money in the stock market. My pension is in 401ks. My pension is in the stock market. Gee, the stock market is going up. I have more money. Well, what are those stocks based on? Where is the production? Where is the physical reality that supports those stocks, that supports the value of that stock? Well, it says it's worth so much, and it goes up and it goes down. But where's the physical reality? Where is the actual relationship between the value of the stock, right, and the value of the real value of the company of that for which the stock is a part ownership of? Where is the real value? Well, they're making money. Well, how are they making money? Are they producing anything? Are they creating anything? Are they viable? Well, they must be. Otherwise, they wouldn't, their stocks wouldn't be going up and down. So you have essentially a complete lack of a sense of what a national economy is, what the reality of a national economy is. How does it work? So what was done was to say, okay, we can make more money by farming out the production to another place. And then we can make more money by having that other place buy from over here. And we can make more money. And so you created this just-in-time globalization that was supposed to be profitable. But was it really profitable in physical terms? No. And then we created the WTO, the World Trade Organization, General Agreement on Trade and Tariffs, the European Union, NAFTA. These were all structures which define a reality that had nothing to do with the general welfare of the people of the countries that were involved. It was an international structure for corporations to make greater profit on the books, but not to really improve the conditions of life, not to create a sound physical economic structure. So they relegated the production to other parts of the world, but they didn't allow those other parts of the world necessarily to have the quality of life and the conditions and the infrastructure. So they didn't really get developed. And the consumer society wasn't developing either. So you ended up with this world economy where nobody's being developed. And now you have the situation of a crisis where it's determined by the physical reality. It's not determined by printing of money. And there's no amount of money that you're going to print that's going to revive the physical economy of the United States by itself. You have to engage the physical productive process. So liberalism is the belief that you can have a world that is not real. And as long as the problems created by having that kind of world is some other person's problem, it's not your problem. You don't care. So when people are going to lose their entire savings coming very soon because the financial system is finished, and all those stocks are going to get wiped out, and all of those investments are going to get wiped out, and people are going to have to wake up to the reality that it was all a fantasy. It was all a huge scam. The whole thing. It wasn't based on a real notion of how human beings survive in a real economy. How you develop, how you grow. How you increase your living standard, how you actually increase the production, the wealth that's being created. None of that is real to people. It's in China. It's real because the Communist Party leadership realized they were getting screwed by this free trade system, and they decided to adopt Lyndon LaRouche's Belt and Road, and they decided to change the orientation of their economy so that they would go into a massive reorientation towards development. And that is why they're able to deal with this thing, this COVID-19 thing, and we're not. And we're not dealing with it properly because we don't have the means to deal with it properly. And we don't have a population or leadership in our population that it has that sense. And we have a president who's completely unprepared to deal with this. And he has all these bankers, all these guys screaming, Mnuchin and Pompeo, they're all screaming that China caused the virus or caused the problem. They're saying that China's economic development is a bigger threat to the financial system than the virus. They want umpteen $1 trillion in bailout, part of the whole way of and so forth. And none of that's going to do any good because they're bankrupt. The whole system is bankrupt. You can throw all the money in the world at it. It won't work. You have to shut down these financial systems. You have to shut down the financial markets and reorganize and protect the physical part of the economy, the part of the economy that actually is doing things, in which people are actually eating and sleeping and living and are actually production. You have to protect that. This entire financial system is finished. And that's where the LaRouche's 4 laws, starting with Glass-Steagall, is so important. And this is something we've been preparing for 45 years for. And we're now at that point where the president is going to have to, in a very unprepared way, put the U.S. into a different, cut off the financial system, cut off the parasite, cut off the 100-pound parasite on the 10-pound dog. He's going to have to extricate that parasite and protect the dog. And that to do that, you need Glass-Steagall, and he's going to have to do that. There is no, and then he has to work something out with other nations so that there's a system where nations can actually trade without being parasited upon by the financial speculation. So Trump is saying that we might get people back to work starting by Easter, which is, I believe, the 12th of April, but which is less than 3 weeks. But it doesn't look that way. And you have places in the country which are now exploding with the COVID-19. New York City is one, and I'm expecting the second huge explosion to be in Los Angeles. The mayor of Los Angeles is very worried, and he's giving dire warning to the people of Los Angeles that this thing will be full blown within 2 weeks in Los Angeles. And so the country right now is in this crisis, and regardless of the main disease is liberalism. Liberalism in many different forms. The liberalism that somehow the market will decide what is the best course of action economically. So leave the magic to the market. That's a total fantasy. That's a total scam. It provides an excuse to not have the government protect the people from the criminality of the financial of the financiers. And the best example of this is how we create our money. Do we create money in this country for the purpose of developing the country? No. The Federal Reserve was set up in 1913 not to do that, but to keep the banks solvent so that they could have more power to seek to make a profit with their funds and force people to have to pay for the use of the funds that they're lending without those funds being directed to the real economy. And that's not what Hamilton created with the National Bank. The purpose of the National Bank was to lend directly to the physical economy and in collaboration with the private banking system, or to lead the private banking system into the development of the country. The purpose of the National Bank was to do that. Now, what is money? Well, let's go into the question of what is money. Money is what? Currency. What is the thing? What is a currency that a national currency? What is it? A national currency, that which circulates as currency, is a debt to the entire nation and the people that is owed to the nation and owed to the people. When a government creates a currency or allows a currency to be used, a nation uses a currency, that currency, if it's created by the nation, is a debt that's owed to all the people and the nation. Okay? But when a currency is controlled by a private sector, and they issue the currency, in effect, and you need to have that currency in order to do business, and they're charging you interest on that currency. That currency, however, is under the control of the use of that currency is under the control of or issuing of that currency is under control of the private banking system. It does not go necessarily to anything that's going to develop a country, because the private financial sector doesn't care about whether the country gets developed or not. They care about the rate of so-called financial profit on it. Whereas to invest in a physical economic development, it's a different matter. So you need to direct the credit that your society creates in that purpose, and then as that credit is used by the population, the private sector comes in as a participant through the actual expansion of that credit as it is being used to create the development. In the case of the current situation with the U.S., until the 1990s, is the Federal Reserve purchased government debt from the major banks in New York, and the major banks from New York then multiplied that through the banking system as loans. So the government debt is held privately and traded, and the government debt is the basis for the currency, but the currency is not being used to develop the country. Now, up until the repeal of Glass-Steagall, you had at least a firewall between the investment banks and the commercial banking system, and because of that, you could provide insure or provide for deposits up to a certain amount, because the funds were deposited, and then deposits created loans, and that was restricted to the commercial sector and for business to be able to conduct business. But they changed all of that. That doesn't work anymore, and yet the liability for all of these banks still exists with the government. They transferred the liability to the investment banking sector, and that's why you've had these bailouts. That's why you have quadrillions of dollars. It's insane. It's not going to work. It is going to come down, and of course, the threat of it coming down is what is used to control presidents. That's what is used to control government. So right now, we've gone from a private banking system controlling the credit of a nation to a private banking system, a private international investment banking, not an investment banking system, blackmailing a country. Saying you don't bail out, well, the whole thing is going to collapse on you, and you will have tanks in the streets, as they said in 2008. And then who has the guts to take this on? Well, the presidency is going to have to take it on because the presidency represents the general welfare of the people. Congress is a mess, but they're going to have to do it. Otherwise, we're all going to be crushed. We're going to be destroyed. The nation will be destroyed. It's going to have to be done. It's going to have to be done in this immediate period as this crisis gets worse. We're going to have to create a credit system. FDR did that through the Reconstruction Finance Corporation. He had to create a system where credit could go to build the country. Lincoln did it with greenbacks. He couldn't go through the private banking sector. He had to create greenbacks. Hamilton did it with the National Bank. So that's what's going to have to be done again. There is no other way. Liberals don't understand that. You try to explain this to a liberal, and they don't. It's like you're saying you know what has to be done. Nobody knows what has to be done. That's what a liberal will tell you. You're saying you can understand physical economics and what the consequences of policy are going to be. No, liberals will say no. You can't. You can't know that. You can't know that. Economics is not a science. It's whatever we want it to be. It's supply and demand and, marginal utility and all of that. But it's not, they're not talking about a physical reality. They're talking about, how to do business. But not a physical reality, how to make money. They're not talking about the physical reality of anything. So that's liberalism. And liberalism is the belief that you have wealth when you don't. You don't have any wealth. You don't have a retirement fund. You don't have a retirement. You don't have a pension fund. We're going to have to all depend on the government to reorganize everything, or else you're not going to live. And that's kind of where we are right now. That's kind of where we're going. So all of you out there, it's time to start calling your congressmen and your state legislators and say, look, we're not going to be able to bail out the bank and save the people. We need to do the Glass-Steagall. We need to get a credit system. We're going to have to do stuff like that. Now, the LaRouche movement's been doing that for a long time. For several decades, we've been talking to these congressmen and state legislators and trade unions and everything else like that. It's not like they don't know that a lot of the leadership of our country doesn't know that that's what they have to do. But it has to be done. And the powers that run this global financial system do not want that. They would rather you die. They would rather that you die. And that's what we're facing. And that's what we're looking at.